The component of developing a structure in academic writing is almost as important as the content. It is the way we organize our essay to enable a logical flow, coherence, and comprehension. Welcome to Atlas Crossings. Today is a good day to share knowledge. At the end of this video, you should understand how to develop and design a structure in academic writing. A good and well-written essay should contain 4 core structures: the introduction, the main body, the conclusion, and the reference section. In some cases, there will be optional sections, for example, the appendices. To understand each component of essay's structure, we would use examples using a previous research titled Entrepreneur Finance Models for Bond Global Firms in the Mint region. The introduction section introduces a topic and tells the reader what the research is about. Within this section, you want to be very clear and concise. Of course, for many university essays, there is a word limit to it, and depending on how long or short the word limit is, you need to be very concise to deliver a clear, brief, and well understood introduction. We describe the introduction section as being like a funnel. You basically start from the top in a broader sense and narrow it down to the core of what the research is. There are 3 key parts of your introduction. You have the hook, you have the background, and you have the thesis statement. The hook can start off with a very strong statement, a question, a quote, a story, or a very interesting statistics about the broad subject matter. And then your background provides an understanding, the foundational knowledge of what the research or the subject matter is about. And finally, you have your thesis statement, which narrows the conversation down to the core of what your research or your essay is about. Let's have a look at an example. Now, this is an example of an introduction section, and this is a research that was written about 5 or 6 years ago. Let's see if this actually meets the requirement for an introductory section. You can pause the video and see if you understand which areas are the hook, the background, and the thesis statement. Now, this section describes the hook. It tells us about Bond Global Firms being a very strong driving force to world economic and social growth. At this point, we really might not know about Bond Global Firms. We probably don't know about SMEs. But what we know is that these terms or these companies or this group of firms essentially play an important role to economic growth. Now, we expect that the hook should be able to captivate the reader and get the reader to want to know more about what the research is. The next section is the background, and it provides an understanding of the broad concept of the subject matter. And in this case, it talks about Bond Global Firms, their activities, and what they do. Finally, that introductory section, we have the thesis statement, and this is telling us what the research aims to do. And it says this research focuses on the impact of entrepreneur finance models on the outcome of Bond Global Firms that are headquartered in these regions. Now, when you write, a good introduction section should have these 3 key elements: the hook, the background, and the thesis statement. The next one is the main body. Of course, the main body is the main part of the work. It's where you provide the content that addresses what the goal of the research is. It will contain several paragraphs. Always good to use headings and subheadings. And we'll look at an example of how we can create the main body and some of the key elements that will be identifiable. What you want to do is to make sure that each paragraph and each section contains 3 fundamental elements: the topic, explanation or evidence, and a conclusion or a transition to the next paragraph or to the next section. We've talked about smooth transition in a previous video on academic writing. I'll put the link in the description for you to go back and watch that. But for this video, we'll talk about what that transition means and what it actually looks like and how it can help you when you write any form of essay or even any form of document, whether professional or academic. Now you can pause the video and look at this section. This section we've called the literature review. There are 3 paragraphs that we'll look at and we'll see if these paragraphs actually meet the 3 fundamental elements of writing a paragraph or section. Now, if you've identified this as the topic, then you will be correct. Now, the topic basically talks about or points to what that paragraph is highlighting. Remember, what you want to do with each paragraph is to focus on the topic or a point before moving on to a different point, which will be put in a different paragraph. And the topic here presents the discussion around statistics and literature around innovative startups. The explanation, elaboration, or evidence section of your paragraph describes or explains or critically reviews the topic. It goes a bit more or it goes a bit further to discuss the topic and explain, providing evidence where necessary. The transition part of the paragraph helps us to conclude the paragraph we're currently in and connects us or builds us up for the next paragraph or the next section. And we see an example here, and we describe this as a very subtle transition. But this talks about how born global firms and SMEs generate employment or generate jobs or create jobs. And that moves us to or builds us into the next paragraph that starts off with talking about generation of sustainable jobs. Again, you can pause the video and see if you can identify the different areas in paragraph 2. And if you identify these sections, that will be correct. So we have, again, the topic, the explanation, and the transition. In this case, we identify the transition here as a strong transition as it clearly points to what the next section or the next paragraph should be. And we do that by asking a question around understanding entrepreneurial finance, or what is entrepreneurial finance. And that takes us to the next section that starts by addressing entrepreneurial finance. But what you also see is that in some cases here, the topic area is also like a hook. It could be a statistics, it could be a question. The transition can also be a statistics or a question, and then is built on from the next paragraph. So when we write, we should try to ensure that our paragraphs and sections actually reflect these 3 key elements. We can see no matter how short or long the paragraphs are, we could actually incorporate these 3 key elements, the topic, explanation, and transition, into each of those paragraphs to deliver a clear and concise work that is easy to comprehend by the readers. The third component of your structure is the conclusion. And in this area, you're basically restating the thesis statement, what you say you were going to do in the research. You're summarizing the main arguments that you've presented in the work, and you're going to try to end with a thought-provoking insight, recommendation, or a call to action. And finally, you have the references or bibliography section. List all the sources cited. You need to use recommended referencing style. Some universities will recommend an APA referencing style, or Harvard. There are quite a couple of softwares that can help you to provide a proper reference listing. Let's see an example of what a reference section looks like. The reference section would list your references in alphabetical order. You can use softwares at different softwares. You can look at your university websites or recommended university softwares, or the ones they have access to help you with your referencing. Your optional section can include your appendices. I say your appendices can help you sufficiently to provide supplementary material or information. In this area, you can provide definitions of terms, basic descriptions if you wish. Now, it helps you to provide more solid contents within the main body, more relevant contents within the main body, considering you might have word limitations or restrictions with the number of words within the main document. Your appendices, you can use that to provide basic definitions and descriptions, which can help to provide sufficient knowledge for some areas within the work. But you have to make sure that you always link your appendix with the main body of the work. So within the main body of the work, if you've had a definition or you have a diagram or a chart you've illustrated, you can say within the work, please see Appendix 1 or Appendix 2, or Appendix 1.1 for the definition or description of what this actually means. Or see the data presented in Appendix, or see the table. And that means you've always provided a link within the work with the appendix. So you don't just provide an appendix, providing data there without linking to the appropriate section within the main body of the work. And other things you can add: charts, diagrams, screenshots, snapshots, all of that can go into your appendices. Now, at the end of the day, this is what your work could look like. This is a table of contents that has been developed as an illustration. What you might see added here is as a conclusion for some of the main sections. What I try to do in the writing is to always start with telling the reader what I'm going to tell them. And then within the main part of the work, I tell them what I said I was going to tell them. And the conclusion is going over or restating what I told them I was going to tell them and what it was that I told them. We always try to keep the reader on track to stay focused on the core discussion of the research or the essay. So always trying to signpost them with headings, always trying to remind them that this is what we're trying to talk about, and making sure we're also addressing what we say we're going to address. So it also helps us, not just the reader, but it also helps us to address the task which is being looked at. Now, the structure provided in this video can be applied to any type of essay writing. Now, the notion here is to maintain a flow within the work, a logical flow, coherence, and enabling comprehension. So we keep reminding the readers what the focus of the essay we're writing is about, trying to ensure that we have a clear flow and engaging the reader to maintain the focus on the work that we have presented to them. However, I would also add, if a tutor within a university has provided specific requirements as to how they want the structure of their work to be, it is quite important that you follow that tutor's requirement. But overall, the structure we've provided will work for any type of essay and will provide a clear and efficient academic writing process for you when you write. Now, that is that for today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found this video relevant and helpful. If you did, put down a comment in the comment section. Tell us what you think about the video, and don't forget to continue to show up.